Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. MSP 1337. I'm joined by Bobby Glen James of Boteka. Bobby, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you nailed what we're talking about right out of the gate. So this is on my mind. Real security, keep it simple. Walk us through a little bit of that model. I know we talked a little bit about the Six Sigma and some approaches to workflows and the ideas around what we're good at. But start me off with like where you came up with why keep it simple or keep technology simple, security simple in the context of being an MSP.
Absolutely. So the biggest thing is I've been in this space a long time. Since the 90s, I got my MCSE way back in the early days, worked in big corporate companies in the IT space and kind of grew up in that era of IT. We were our own little silo and we did everything and no, you can't do that. No, you can't do, that we were the power that bees. Nobody did anything. If you were in this IT, we made all the decisions for everybody. And it always seemed not very efficient because marketing would mess up something and do something, and then sales would do something different and operations would do something different. And it was never, to me, it didn't feel, even in the big, especially in the big corporate companies, it just felt lacking. Something was missing. We got more and more complicated. And as we got more and more complicated, security things happened more often where we had breaches, and you see it in big corporations all the time now. And that's only getting worse. So I've through my 25 years of being in the technology space, I've decided, the best way to secure things is to make things simpler, make things easier.
Yeah, so it raises a question. I've had this question, and I'm more get the question than I have this question. What should I be using for fill in the blank to solve for whatever the security gap is? And in so many cases, I find that they have a product or a service that already does something in that gap, and it does it okay. And they're looking for something that does it better or has more integrations or has more something. And I often find myself saying, is this where you should be focusing your time and energy? What about the gaps that you still have that you haven't filled? And you're over here, churning wrenches to try and see if you need a better tool.
Yes. Or you're tweaking it constantly. And like you said, you're missing out on some of these. That's why audits are really important. And, we all talk about audits. Everybody should be having security audits, and audits is a big deal. But my thought on audits is we should be auditing the technology. Is it working for us?
Sure.
Is this the technology that we should really be using? Or should we compact some things? Do we really need this, and this? Or should we streamline it a little bit? So when I talk about audits, I'm talking about technology audits. We're looking at, hey, is this really working in the company? And that's where then you're going to fill holes, or you're going to fix things in a much more efficient way.
Sure. It raises some questions. We go back to the keep it simple. Do you see MSPs taking on more than they can handle?
All the time. And then they do it with a smile, or they just all the time. I have driven my company. This is our motto, our full force. I mean, I even wrote the book on it. I mean, that's Lean IT. That and we don't get overwhelmed. My guys don't get overwhelmed. We are not constantly putting out fires. That's most MSPs' bread and butter, is constantly putting out fires. And if you're doing IT right, if you're doing it correctly, you shouldn't be having a lot of fires. And that's it. And
right.
That's how they make a lot of money. They make a lot of money by jumping to the rescue and charging high amounts of hourly fees and all of that stuff. So they have no incentive really to fix it. At least third-party IT, MSPs specifically,
Yeah.
corporate IT, yeah, they're in their own little world. Let's face it, they're in their own little world.
Right. So let me ask you a question. I think it would be safe to jump towards the what we were really talking about before, which is, what should MSPs be focusing on? So talk to me a little bit about why you wrote Lean IT and where someone might be able to track down to get a copy of your book.
You can find it on Amazon, of course, like most books.
Okay.
It's on Amazon, and I wrote it just for me, for a kind of a catharsis thing. This is it. I've just been seeing for so many years that I believe the MSP model is kind of broken. It's always worked like it is, but I'm a customer service focused kind of person where I actually want to care about the client and their protection and being able to run their company better instead of how to put more money in my pocket. And MSPs have kind of been running like, how do we figure out how to get more contracts? How do we get people on contract for 3 years? We don't do any contracts because holding somebody hostage is not a good model. I don't like it.
Right.
Even though almost all MSPs have them, it's not a good way to take care of somebody. And that's the classic. Another thing that we don't do is we don't sell hardware. We don't upsell software or hardware. We do not do it. We're strictly service-based. We go in and we assist you in taking care of things. We don't try and figure out, well, if you buy this new server, this is what you really need. Well, man, I know I'm going to get an extra 15 grand in my pocket when I sell this to them. I just don't feel that. I feel that's a conflict of interest, and it's not taking care of that client.
Yeah,
so
and being an expert on being an expert on hardware is not easy either, right? Like you'd be a full-time, I need the Xeon thingamajigger, the 9i9, whatever, AMZ, DZ. Yeah, it's just a constant, perpetual, like trying to stay on top of those things. So a couple of things that you bring up with what the reason you wrote the book and trying to address that sparks interest to me is when you think about when a client gets onboarded to a new MSP and the technology or the tools that were left behind, the artifacts that 2, 3, 4 years later, or even showing multiple MSPs prior still have tools in there.
Yes, that's the other thing. People are jumping around because they're constantly unhappy with how the MSPs are taking care of them. I'll tell you, I have clients that I've had for 17 years. Most of my clients, unless we get new ones, are with us for years and years and years because we don't lose clients because they understand, oh, this is different. This is different than the other MSPs that we're taking care of. It's night and day difference. And it comes down to really just caring about that client instead of the money we get paid and the money comes. If you quit focusing on how do I get another dollar out of the client, you can take care of them. You can fill holes. You don't have to, because most MSPs love that bubblegum analogy of when there's the water's coming out of the dam and they put the bubblegum there, just like you were talking about before.
Sure.
They love that because that's big money for them. But if you just get paid to make sure the dam is solid and never get holes in it, I feel secure. We're making enough money to run our company. A good friend always told me what is fair for them and what is fair for us. And that's the way I live it. That's the way I live my life, is what is fair to you is fair to me, instead of trying to figure out a way to take advantage or connect. And it's just not a great place to be secure, to take care of the client. Anyway, I'm going to harp on that a lot.
No, I think sometimes we just need to hear that, the reminder that says we don't have to be, the jack of all trades, master of none, even though the client might want that from us. And I also think that with regulation and compliance, regulatory compliance, we're starting to run into things where if you have too many tools, too many services, too many things, you start to put your entire organization and your clients' organizations at risk because maintaining that is difficult.
100%. So true. And you said it before. trying to be an expert on all of the hardware and stuff. That's why I also, if I've got a connection with a vendor and I get, kickbacks from that vendor, then I can't go and look at other vendors. I can't see what other dude, we've got so many different vendors that we call. So what we do is we call and we'll get quotes from a bunch of different vendors, and they all know that we don't take kickbacks. I'm not looking for, 10% of whatever they're selling or anything like that. But then I get feedback from all of them, like you said, what kind of a server? This is what we're doing at this corporation, and I'll get all of this different feedback from the experts that are in the field selling that stuff constantly, nonstop. And when you take away the hey, I'm not interested in how much it's going to make me, then they get real with you, and they go, you know what, you don't need this, dude. This company doesn't need this much stuff. In fact, you maybe don't even need on-prem.
Sure.
You maybe just need a service to take care of this one piece. And we all know that that's happening more and more.
It's interesting because, it used to be we were tracking warranties and we were tracking, life cycle of devices. And the reality is devices last longer than they used to. But more importantly, outside of the service delivery model of the tools you use to provide services to them, I don't really care what devices they use anymore. I mean, you want Lenovo or IBM or Dell? Well, I just told you how old I am. you want Lenovo or Dell or fill in the blank, right? And I think that one of the things we run into, and you see this a lot, you talked about simplicity. You could list off probably 10 or 20 different vendors that sell firewalls off the top of your head, right? Absolutely. And at the end of the day, while some are better than others, the reality is they all were designed to do more or less the same thing. 100%. And that's really what matters, right? So I can understand if you said we provide support services to the following 2 or 3, not to these 20. Again, we can only provide services to so many. But to your point, how do you go down that path? Because I think that's an interesting one that you talk about with staying lean and keeping it simple. Obviously, not every client's a good fit, but do you have sort of a standardization model that you have so that you can help your clients say, hey, look, if I'm bringing in, Bobby's company, what does it look like for me to engage your services as opposed to the MSP down the street that's like, I don't care what firewall you want, we'll buy you whatever.
I like the way you're going with this. And this is kind of what happens when we go into maybe a new client, either a bigger client or usually, we're talking maybe a big manufacturing company or something. They've spent some money on the infrastructure, right?
Sure.
And like you said, we can't know all my techs. We don't know everything about Palo Alto, firewalls or Fortinet or we don't know exactly all. I mean, we've used in some form or fashion. So they have something like that. And like you said, we can go in and get into a Meraki firewall, which is, we use a lot of those because it's just a pretty solid system, and we can do whatever we need to. Now, we do have a standard kind of thought process around how we build out the networks. We do our best to cookie cutter them a lot, but when you go into a new one, you're bombarded with all kinds of crazy crap. So it takes at least a year for us to kind of sit down, because one thing that some MSPs do, and it's horrible, is they immediately go in, throw everything out, have the people spend a ton of money on hardware because, hey, all of this was done wrong. We know in the IT space, every IT guy is smarter than the other one. We know that.
Sure.
And so you've got to do it this way. And I don't love that, because how many security holes are you creating now that they had to spend years to try and shore up? So we sit there, we go over, hey, and it takes usually a year for us to kind of walk to our cookie cutter thought process, because again, with cookie cutter stuff, we know it like the back of our hand. We can secure that more tighter, so we can kind of move them in that direction. And 9 times out of 10, we ask them to buy less stuff, not more stuff.
Interesting. I like that approach, and I think that one of the things that we're starting to see, and maybe you are as well, with your background in the security, is that You no longer really have to sell cybersecurity. You have to help them understand their risks. And your role then becomes more about advising them on the things that make sense. And that when they have ownership of making the decision around something that you aren't selling, but you can make available through their buying process, you create a more dynamic relationship anyways, because now it's not just you being responsible for the outcome. They've got skin in the game.
I love that because, just a while, not very long ago, security was a hard sell. Nobody cared. Back in the day, 15 years ago, our security guys were the first ones to get laid off.
Sure.
They were those and the training guys. Those two guys were always the first guys to get laid off. And it's like, oh yeah, we need security. Yeah, we need security. But that world has changed.
Yeah, we
all
didn't
know
separate it.
now if you don't secure things, you will be breached. Period.
Sure. Right, but I also think we did a disservice as MSPs. If we go back in time, we didn't go to them and say, for your all-you-can-eat per user per month, you get firewall, antivirus as part of your security services. We just included them in the services.
Except us. That is exactly what we do. I love that you said that. We take care of them. It's full service, and you pay a monthly fee, and that's it. There is no hourly charges or any of that, because I can't take care of the client that way. Really take care of the client.
Well, I mean, I remember when we did it per device, right? Then Microsoft's like, hey, you can include 5 devices for the same price. And you're like, now how do I break this down and price it out? But in that model, I think we're in this position now, though, when you look at that monthly user package, we're now dealing with things that we didn't before, like your XDR tools and what's included, what's the escalation path, what happens when a client does have that infamous B word happen and they're calling you for help, and you're like, well, now we're in a different situation, and now this is a billable item that you're going to submit to your insurance company. Whether you actually ever do get paid for it or not, it becomes a different scenario. How do you go through that with your clients up front? Because everything's all inclusive until it's not.
Yeah, there's always in the contract, there's always some caveats, of course, when we're spending all weekend trying to get over a breach and everything is shut down. And that's very few now. I mean, we really work hard to keep things like that happening, but a few years back, we've all had it happen to us at least once. And I will tell you, I never want that again.
No.
Oh, the sleepless nights, the hours and hours of trying to figure out if the backups are functioning at all. And I will tell you, I have never been in a situation where we've given money over or anything like that. I've never had that happen, because luckily we have shored up things on that back end and I've always been a paranoid. I mean, you can't be in security and not be paranoid. I mean, that's how it is.
Well, and even if it's not you that it's happening to, I've never had, knock on wood, outside of some identity fraud type stuff, it hasn't happened to me personally, but I can tell you that when I get that phone call for someone that's asking for help, it feels like I am also a victim.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gut punch. I had a guy call me asking me, how do I get Bitcoin? This was a few years back. I need to get some Bitcoin. And he was an MSP, and he was calling me. He's like, dude, my client, I am screwed, dude. How do I get Bitcoin so I can release the stuff? And I'm like, dude, I am so sorry. I mean, I can tell you how to get Bitcoin, but dude, every time somebody does it and every time somebody pays,
you're enabling it.
Yes, you're making it again. And the only people I talked to, the one time it happened to one of our bigger clients, the only people I talked to was the FBI. And saying, hey, this is a breach. Here's here. When you see that freaking screen on your server, dude, it is brutal. I'm telling you, it's only happened to me once, and we were able to get everything up, and the company was running beautifully that Monday. But dude, it is horrifying to see that freaking screen.
Yeah, I can relate. I had one, and to your point about conversions, we had the gang that attacked the client at the time I was working with. They required a specific Bitcoin currency that required converting your US dollars to Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin to the whatever the currency was at the time. This has been a while. And what was interesting is to go from the first currency to the second currency required a minimum of 48 hours to do the exchanges with the coins. And they wanted us to do this paid transaction within 4 hours. And you're like, hey, I get that you're the bad guys, and but could you like give us a little bit of patience because we have to convert all these currencies? And of course, what we're really doing, regardless of whether or not we could get the money, is we were just buying time to see what damage had actually been done. And inadvertently, there had been no data exfiltration. And back then, it was more about crippling and stopping production, productivity. But what was crazy about it is that even the little ones, they were back online within 3 or 4 days. And it happened over a weekend, so not the end of the world. But it was probably another 10 to 12 months before everything was truly restored. And I think that's the scary part for any, is that whether it gets fixed right away or not, the lasting effects can take years.
Yes, it is damaging. They say on average 22 days with ransomware. 22 days.
I don't doubt it.
What freaking company can be shut down for 22 days without some kind of horrible ramifications?
Well, you bring up some interesting, not to stay in the dark here, but like if you think about recovery of systems, what needs to come back first? One would argue that whether you're healthcare or an MSP, it's going to be payroll. People tend to not work if they don't get paid. You can't order medications if you're not getting paid. So I'd be curious on your thoughts on going back to the simple, keeping it simple model. When you're having conversations with clients, obviously it's not if, but when, having the conversation around, hey, what's the most important system to you? And more specifically, how long can you be offline without access to it? I would think that in your simple model, you can probably cut to the chase pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing is, crap, I just had this awesome thing to say, and now it jumped right out of my brain.
That's sometimes the most awesome things do that. I'll see if this prompts it again. I always say that there's the core four. You might have more than that, but the core four would be like your RMM tools. If we're talking about an MSP, your RMM tools, your finance package, your PSA, and then maybe there's probably email or your communication system. I would lump that together. So with the convergence of today, your email and your phone might even be in the same application. But I would argue that those are your core apps. I would think from there, how you approach what comes back online first is paramount. And obviously there's scenarios both from it's been encrypted or crippled versus like we've got a serious power outage or natural disaster. I mean, they all kind of have still prioritization. I'm just be curious, when you prioritize them, how do you have that conversation? Because I don't think it's an easy one. I need them all right now.
Yeah, agreed. And I kind of want to answer that by going in a little bit different direction.
Sure. Okay.
So here's my thought process, and this might not be your listeners may be going, oh,
it'll
man,
be fine.
Shut up, dude. This is ridiculous. Yeah. I am a firm believer that if there are third-party options out there that you don't need to have in-house, here's my analogy. You can build your own system in-house, and let's say you're gonna spend $40,000, maybe $100,000. You're gonna really kick some butt, and you're gonna build this in-house piece of whatever that payroll or whatever it is. Sure. Finances. You're gonna build your own, and now you spend $100,000. Now there's a third party out there, and we all know there's so many options. How much money did they spend on their product that they built? Billions, in some cases, billions.
Sure.
Which one do you think has a better chance of always being up, always being on,
the longevity,
and always having a giant team watching for holes and breaches? That doesn't mean there isn't breaches, and I'm not saying that you use a great third party. We saw Amazon just a little bit ago That was not pretty, right? So it
Oh yeah, that
happens.
was not pretty was an understatement for the impact it had on tools like Signal and other
Yes.
apps that were just down. But to your point, so you brought up a really interesting concept that I think is largely, if anybody said they were starting an MSP today, they would by and large say that all, if not most, would be cloud delivered, not on-prem delivered. So you'd be more of like, you're buying a window into whatever the tools are, as opposed to you know, having to manage the whole house, right?
Right.
But here's the thing that I find interesting with that is the compromises anymore. The threat actors don't necessarily care about the device, they care about the data. So data exfiltration actually is almost worse now because they don't go in there with the idea that they're going to take Microsoft offline. They just need to take offline your control panel. So, they get access to a user account or something along those lines. So I think the conversation still matters because the accessibility of that application still might be 3 days, 5 days, 2 weeks, or not at all, depending on to what level that data has been crippled.
True. Yeah, I mean that's very true. I mean, I agree with you. So then you go back to what you're originally talking about, which
Yeah,
is what's the most important thing right now for the company.
sure.
And after going through it, in the biggest way we did back and this was several years ago. It was before. I hate it that we always use before COVID as a term, but it was,
Yeah,
back then. It just
biblical
became a
times.
different
Yeah,
era. It was
yeah,
just a different era. And so anyway, um, I found out really quickly what was most important, and it always came down to finances in some form or fashion, and how that
sure.
stuff is going to keep going. And then if you're in a manufacturing situation, we've got to have inventory online. We got to know who we're billing and who's coming in and out, and what's going out the door. And, that was the second thing. They needed to know that as soon as possible, because they can't move. And as you know, if a manufacturing plant is not manufacturing, they're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars an hour.
Sure. Yeah,
Uh, that's
it's mind-boggling
yes, it's
for me.
yeah. Back in the olden days, before I mean, this is a long time, in the early 90s, I actually was in quality control in manufacturing. And dude, if the line, if something got through and the manufacturing line was down because some little part was incorrect, dude, it was asses were on the line, dude. It was not pretty.
Yeah, right.
And now it's like that with technology, dude. When a $100 million company gets flatlined for a minute, that is a very, very big deal.
Well, and to wrap it all up, I think what you said at the beginning, the less systems you have to manage, the quicker it is to recover. I mean, let's just face it.
Dude, that's it. Right there.
Lean IT.
That's it.
Well, Bobby, I
Absolutely.
appreciate you coming on the show. For those of you listening, this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks, and have a great week. Done.